I think an important question that we should ask at this point in the interview, Jay, is what have been the long-term health effects of the lockdown? Because I'm seeing an excess death rate. We've got an excess death rate in this country. Nobody's really talking about it because
it's long COVID, mate, all of it.
Yeah. Because it's an unpleasant truth that really nobody wants to talk about. So what have actually been the effects of these lockdowns?
I mean, it's heartbreaking, right? So, in Europe, there was a modeling study. It was a really interesting model study that suggested 100 million people had skipped cancer screening during the pandemic.
100 million?
100 million cancer screenings have been, I shouldn't say people, 100 million cancer screenings had been skipped. That's going to lead to 1 million people with later stage cancer that should have been picked up, then that they're going to, often will kill them that shouldn't have killed them. So women will die of breast cancer, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 that should have been picked up at stage 1 from hormonal screening that didn't happen. That's just one thing. The psychological effects in the U.S., something like 1 in 4 young adults seriously considered suicide in June of 2020. The overhang for like anxiety and depression is enormous. I think that's maybe it's a little less true in Europe and the UK because you guys had Freedom Day earlier. There are like measles cases now, outbreaks in the United States because people skipped basic immunization. Polio has come back. It was on its way out. We were like this close to eradicating polio. In poor countries, it's even worse, right? In I think Uganda, the estimate is that 4.5 million kids, after 2 years of Zoom school, which is ridiculous in a country like Uganda, they never came back to school. That means it's a generation of poor kids in Uganda who will never get an education and will grow up poor. It's just like we fueled inequality in a way that like it's almost unimaginable. And they will lead shorter lives. Even it turns out like even in rich countries, short interruptions of school has these like long-term negative consequences on the lives of kids because they grow up poorer. One estimate published in JAMA Pediatrics early in the pandemic was that just the spring closures alone will lead to 5.5 million lost life years for American kids. The overhang of these lockdowns in terms of what they've done to our health of our society, the social inequality, the poverty is almost impossible to exaggerate. It is catastrophic and terrible. I don't know for certain all those excess deaths you talked about, Francis, are due to the lockdowns, but I do believe that a substantial fraction must be the long tail of the lockdown harms. Places that.
And do you think? Oh, sorry. Carry on, Joe.
No, just one more data point. In Scandinavia, the all-cause excess death rates are actually quite low now. Close to zero. I mean, they didn't lock down nearly as much as the UK did or the US did. I think that the lockdowns will ultimately play some role in explaining it.
Joe, do you think we've learned our lessons from these mistakes, or do you think we're going to make the same mistakes again?
We have not learned our lessons, Francis. I do have some hope that we might. The UK, there's a parliamentary inquiry that's happening on COVID, and there's still now some fight over exactly what's going to be part of that. I think any honest evaluation of these policies will conclude that they were a failure. And they were a disastrous failure that has harmed the economic well-being, the physical well-being, the psychological well-being of vast populations. Any inquiry like the parliamentary that's happening in the UK that doesn't conclude that lockdowns were a disaster, I think won't have been an honest evaluation. There's a lot of people who made these decisions that have a strong vested interest in making sure that these inquiries end up saying, "Oh, everything was fine. We did the best we could under circumstances where it's difficult." But that's not actually right. They suppressed voices that opposed it. They engaged in unethical behaviors like stoking fear in the population using behavioral economics techniques to do that. they made tremendously bad decisions by closing themselves off from criticism. They employed censorship in social media and a whole bunch of other settings so that people couldn't effectively push back. So I think the ultimate outcome of this needs to be these discussions needs to involve people who were pushed aside in the debate. And I think the ultimate outcome has to be that lockdown has to be a dirty word. We have to look, whenever we think about the word lockdown, whenever we think about the concept of lockdown, we shudder in fear. We say we should never do this again. That has to be the outcome of these. But I'm very afraid that that's not going to be. The vested interests that pushed these policies, that benefit from these policies, don't want it to be concluded that way, because then, my God, like, it's a world historic bad thing that happened that they did. Now, I think the outcome should also involve some level of forgiveness. I mean, like, this was so big a thing. It's like, you don't. We have to come together. We can't, like, put half the, indict half the people in the world that made these decisions, or very, very high. We have to live with them. So there has to be some kind of forgiveness, but not until we have a solid understanding and acceptance that what we did was deeply wrong.